Good morning. We'll call the Finance Committee meeting to order. I'll remind everybody about cell phones, as I always do. Let's get them on buzz. And we'll have a roll call.
Mr. Vickery?
Present.
Mr. Kankakee? Mr. Arsenal?
Present.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Present.
Mr. James?
Present.
Mr. Legess? Ms. Polk?
Present.
Ms. Schmidt?
Present.
Mr. Scholl?
Present.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Present.
Mr. Washington?
Present.
Mr. Yates? Mr. Bosser?
Present.
Mr. Lear?
Present. There's a quorum present. Is there any public comment? I've had no request for public comment, but at this point, I would ask again if there's any public comment. Hearing that, I'd ask for a approval of the minutes of the January 27th meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Washington with a motion, Mr. Arsenal with a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. First up today, Vic Laser, Public Defender. And Chief Judge. Brad.
Good morning, and thank you for getting us first on the agenda so we can get back to work. To give you a bit of an update from the last time I was before this committee, the administrative officer for the Illinois courts notified us that we would not be able to use probation services fees for our move from the courthouse to the National City Building. So we were kind of looking in a different direction, and the sheriff stepped up and has offered some help. The sheriff wants to have some holding cells in the courthouse and the space in the basement that the PD office currently occupies would be the only viable location for that. There would be two sets of, not being the computer whiz, two sets of satellites, one from the courthouse to the National City Building, which would let us communicate inside the county computer system. There would be another satellite at the National City Building aimed at the jail, which would allow us to video conference with clients. Those would be paid out of the commissary funds. The approximate amount of the rent, or rough numbers, well, actually I can give you pretty precise numbers, for the first year would be $34,586. And that's actually a little bit higher than succeeding years because there's some certain renovation costs that are going to be paid for by the landlord and built into that first year's rent. There's no security deposit required, so we're going to have to come up with a down payment. And there was a concern by somebody that, well, what happens if we get a courthouse built in a couple of years? Can you get out of this? I spoke with the landlord yesterday who said he would agree to an opt-out clause in that event, give him 120 days notice, and we can terminate the lease. If that were to happen, we would certainly know when we're within 120 days of being able to move in. It's contemplated a 3-year rent, 3-year lease with options for a 4th and a 5th year. Again, it's based on $10 a square foot with 3% increases in rent per year. The sheriff has offered a sum of $24,000 to be taken out of the courthouse security fund towards this project. So the $34,586 for the first year's rent, if it was offset by the $24,000, would leave a shortage of $10,586. So we would need some help from the general fund if we're going to get this thing all the way through. The only other addition I would have to that is we pay monthly rent, just like the private tenants in the building, to come up with a year's rent. So if the sheriff, for the $24,000 out of the court security fund, that's going to be slightly over 8 months of rent. That will allow us to continue to have public defender fees assessed in the appropriate cases, and not only assessed, but hopefully paid by them. Sometimes they're not able to be paid out of bond right at the time of the disposition of the case, and it takes a period of months to get in. So I'm hoping by the time 8 months come around, and we use up the $24,000 from the security fund, that we would now have enough in the public defender fees line from certain clerks, that would be enough there to offset monthly rent thereafter. And so we're looking for, I guess, to amend the motion that you made the last time we were here. It's going to be a little bit different, but we may need the $10,586 approved, knowing that, or hoping that, or being rather certain that the public defender fees will be in place by the time the 8 months have expired. If there's any questions for the chief judge, she's part of this, and knows as much about it as I do.
I referred to that letter from February 18th. Did everybody get a copy of that?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any other special funds or special funds that have been set aside that can be tapped within the courthouse system to make up for a portion of this 10,000 shortfall?
Not that we're aware of. That's what happened with probation fees, when we thought we could give them space downstairs and use the money from them. There are certain rules and regulations how all the fees must be used, and that's when we learned we absolutely could not use those public defender fees. I'm not aware, although I haven't been doing this long, but and I've been meeting with Judge Erickson, I am not aware of any other fund that we could use in the courthouse. However, we do seem to be getting the public defender fees on a daily basis. In other words, what we have to do is when I call the case and the PDs are on it and the case is resolved, the law says we have to then call it for hearing semantics. To assess PD fees. In other words, we'll ask them if they're working, where they're working, how they're paid, their financial status, and then we assess PD fees. They're still usually fairly low. I'll be real honest. I think they've been about $100 thereabouts, maybe up to $200. And we didn't do this for a while because the case law is sort of all over the place. We're in the 3rd district, and then there's 4th district cases, but we've all reread the case law, and it basically says you have to hold a hearing. So we are very careful to call it for hearing and then assess those fees. We're thinking we can do it in that manner between basically the 4 courtrooms. Judge Erickson and I have the criminal courts where we have PDs on a daily basis. Traffic court has PDs, and the aggravated traffic court has public defenders, possibly also juvenile court. So there's 5 courtrooms that we believe we could draw from. And of course there's going to be people that can't pay any PD fees, certainly people in custody and people without no source of income. But I am finding as we call these 4 hearings, there are people, be it a nurse, be it somebody working on the railroad, that we find out they have a job and they can't pay PD fees, but can't afford to hire private attorney.
Mr. Stauffenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the $24,000 from the sheriff a yearly contribution or just a one-time?
I wish it was yearly, but I think it's just a one-time deal.
Okay.
But we're very thankful for that one-time deal.
Yeah.
Chairman Bosser.
Yes, well, I'd reiterate what Judge Elliott just said, generous of the sheriff to step forward and utilize the court security fund and help us get down the road. I think what we were looking for was some cushion in this process to get some, have some rent paid, and while you get geared up to start collecting the PD fees. And it sounds like you're making an effort to do that, and it seems to me with 8 months of rent in hand before we start, is giving us enough cushion to enter into this project. So, question I have is, did we figure out who's going to sign this lease yet?
We're going to defer that to Mr. Boyd.
So if we're going to adopt a resolution here or recommend a resolution, we need to know who in the resolution we're naming to sign the lease and enter into this agreement.
Or you could phrase the motion that to be signed by the person designated by the state's attorney once he's going to need to review the lease. Actually, this is almost the identical motion that we were here, I guess it was 2 months ago, except that then we were expecting the first 12 months rent would be paid through probation fees. Now we're looking at the first 8 months paid through the security fund. So everything else is really the same. It's just going to, the subsidy is going to end 4 months sooner.
Mr. James.
Thank you. Question is this a free gratis type donation to you, or is this going to be a loan whereby you'll be paying us back? In other words, will the sheriff be getting his $24,000 back, and if we advance this out of proceeds down the road, could we expect a reimbursement?
I believe it's for the holding cells. We're in great need for, if you ever visit the courthouse, for holding cells. The custodies are brought over 1, 2, 4, 5, at least, I want to say 5 times a day. They're brought to many courtrooms. In the basement, which, as Mr. Glazer said, is probably the only place we can securely put holding cells where the PD's office is. My understanding, and Sheriff is here, Tim, but he's going to have 3 holding cells, 1 for the males, 1 for the females, and 1 for the juvenile. That might eliminate some transportation, I don't know, but it will certainly help in security, because I think we've spoken about it before. But we're all walking through sometimes 30 custodies that are sitting there from the jail. So there was a security situation also. So what he's getting for his 24 is basically 3 holding cells in the basement.
All right. And for our $10,586, are we making you a loan? Are you expecting us just to throw it in?
No, it's just.
Well, we are hopeful that there's going to be no contribution. If the public defender fees are generated enough between the time, it's actually going to be probably more like 9 months, because from the day we say to the landlord it's a go, it's going to take them a month to get the space ready. So we have that month, and we have the 8 months of the subsidized rent for us to accumulate the public defender fees. If all goes well, there's going to be no need to dip into the contingency fund or anything else. That money will be there in the public defender fees. But as I told you last time, I can't guarantee anything. I believe that, and I estimate that we will have in excess of that amount.
We've been accumulating, I would say, and the day's different, but between just the 3rd floor where Judge Erickson and I are, every morning, which they're waiting now, the PD fees, I would say, have about $500 between each of those courtrooms, and you've got 3 other courtrooms. Now, as he said, if there's bond money, then the money is immediate. The problem is if the person is put on court supervision or probation, let's say for a year, you might give them 6 months or so to pay the fees. So some of those monies can be taken out of bond immediately. Some of them, certainly the defendants are given time to pay, depending on what the disposition is.
Mr. Washington.
You mentioned the holding cells. The holding cells are separate. They're going to be constructed separately from these monies that we're talking about. Tim?
I'm not sure I can answer that one.
What's the question? Repeat again.
Are the holding cells going to be constructed separately, cost-wise, from the monies that we're talking about here?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Sheriff responds, yes, they are. Okay. Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Chairman. I think at the criminal justice meeting, from the time they've started until the meeting we had last week, was $1,401 already collected in the defenders. I think that's what Ms. Thomas told us at the criminal justice.
For December and January, I believe, rough numbers, a little bit over 2,400 have been assessed and a little over 1,400 actually collected.
We need a motion. And we'll need to state the resolution, I guess, how we want to state it, right? Give us a little help here.
We're looking for a motion that would enable a designated person from the state attorney's office. They will designate someone to enter into a lease for 3 years with the options for 4 and 5, starting at $10 a square foot, 3% raises. And I think one of the things that was important last time is that there's some type of an understanding between the county and Mr. McCarty here, the judge and myself, that the public defender fees, obviously it goes back into the general fund. It doesn't go into a separate place, but the understanding, I guess, that we need to make it clear, or have it some way phrased in the motion, is that that money that goes in to the general fund from the public defender fees will be used to pay for this project.
Okay. Need a motion.
Well,
It's not clear.
could we clarify that language on how we're doing the finances? It would seem to me that the resolution could state that the rent for the public defender's offices could be paid from the sheriff's court security fund up to and not exceeding $24,000 within the first year. And any rents after that point paid by the general fund as needed. In addition, the improvements that we talked about in terms of communication would also be paid by the commissary account, estimated to be $14,000. That would be the microwave or the wireless connections between the National City Building and the courthouse and the jail.
Mr. Washington.
Yeah.
We need to amend the first motion that we made. So this is an amendment to that motion rather than a brand new motion. So the things that we've discussed need to be discussed in terms of an amendment to the original motion.
Why don't we rescind the motion from the last meeting?
Yes.
Let's do it then.
We can.
We can.
Let's have a motion I make a motion to rescind the original motion.
Mr. Washington with a motion to rescind that original motion.
We know.
Mr. Scholl with a second. Maybe we'd better do a roll call, Mr.
Mr. Vickery?
Yes.
Mr. Kleckie?
Aye.
Mr. Arsenal?
Aye.
Ms. Farber? Ms. Campbell? Aye. Mr. James?
Aye.
Mr. Legess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk? Aye. Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Bossert?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. make a
Okay,
motion.
we'll rephrase the motion now. Let's put together a motion that follows basically the sheriff's letter and includes the public defender funds to go to offset the balance that's coming out of the general fund. It's a complicated one, Mr. Washington.
my motion is to include all the wording that we discussed. in the new motion, and have that forwarded to the United States Attorney.
Okay, I have approved designated person by State's Attorney's Office to enter into lease agreement. Rent for public defender's office be paid by sheriff not to exceed $24,000. Thereafter, the public defender fees will offset balance coming out of general fund.
Does the committee agree with that? Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Arsenal with a second, and we'll do a roll call vote. Oh, Smith.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Shane. I'm sorry I missed this. How long is the lease for?
It's for 3 years with an option for a 4th and 5th year. And there is an opt-out clause if the courthouse is built and we need to get out of there and go back into the courthouse, or in space of the new courthouse, we can get out of the lease with 120 days notice.
Any other questions? Sorry. Ms. Smith? Mr. Schultz?
Thank you. Is there anything or any other clarification from your point of view, from your perspective, that we should include in the motion that we have tried to put pieces together we have inadvertently overlooked?
I think you've covered the important things, the ability to enter the lease, the ability to use the security funds, the commissary funds, and that the public defender fees will, even though they go into the general fund, they will be used to supplement the project. So I think you've got it.
Mr. James?
Thank you. Question I have in regards to the lease, 3% increase. Is that for the first 3 years, and then when we renegotiate the lease, we also renegotiate that? Or is that sort of a built-in clause, but there's no cap?
It's a built-in 3% for year 4 and year 5. And that's our option if we want to take it or not.
It's our option if we want to take it or not?
At the end of 3 years, we can move out.
I understand that, but we don't have an option on the 3%. That's what I'm talking
We
about.
don't have an option on the 3%. But by the same token, we don't have to worry about it being a 5 or 6 or 10% increase.
Thank you.
Just less.
Okay, we need a roll call vote on this.
Yeah, that's good.
Mr. Vickery?
But you want to remember your
Mr.
information.
Kleckie? Mr. Arsenal?
Aye.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Mr. Lejesk? Ms. Holt? Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Boster?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Back
much.
to work
Thank you,
now.
Sheriff.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
We have a request from the sheriff to be next on the agenda, so I need to amend the agenda. Motion by Mr. James, second by Mr. Washington. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like saying no. We'll bring the sheriff. Good morning, Sheriff. Sheriff's trying to stay away from everybody. He's got a bad cold.
I brought my hepatostat. Technically, future people will get up here, so they will catch what I've got. Thank you for allowing me to come up out of order. We have 5 items on the agenda. One is the hiring of additional officers. Since we made that request, we have received a notice from the Department of Homeland Security and the COPS program that they are going to be allocating over $1 billion to hire additional officers, and those officers in layoff status of those departments who are below their authorized levels of staffing will have priority. So what we might suggest here is to defer any action. We can apply effective April 1st, so rather than taking action now, maybe we should wait. If the grant does have language in it that if we contribute, in terms of that language, if we hire 4 and they hire 5 or 6, whatever it might be, we're more inclined to get it. I will caution you, as I've cautioned everybody in the past, that this language has a clause that says whatever you do, it's for 3 years, it's 100% funded, but at the end of the 3rd year, you have to keep the number of people that they brought on for 1 year and fund it 100%. So, in years past, I was told I didn't say that. I've said it every time I've asked for this grant, and I'm going to say it again. There's no mistakes later on. Is there any questions about that?
Chairman Moss.
Sheriff, so the COPS grant, is that part of the stimulus package? Did I see language in that kind of referring to a COPS program?
It is not. It is a new initiative by the president. Goes back to President Clinton, and it's actually the bill sponsor was the now Vice President Joe Biden when he was in the Senate. Sponsored that bill under the Clinton administration, and they just resurfaced it.
It was 100,000 officers.
Correct.
Any other questions? So we're deferring action on those 2 items.
The,
Go ahead.
on the budget amendments, at the Criminal Justice Committee meeting, I brought up that I wasn't here last month. I was on vacation, and there was apparently an amendment made or a motion made that as long as the county's overall budget was within balance, there was no reason to adjust individual office holders' budgets. And I brought to the attention of the Criminal Justice Committee that by statute, elected and appointed officials are required by law to stay within their budget. The way we get out of budget is, for instance, we had Universal Pictures here who wanted to do a movie. We have no idea if that's going to happen before the fiscal year begins. We had the Chicago Bears here. We have no idea how many hours they're going to want us, or the fair. We had a dog kennel out in the eastern part of the county that provided over $19,000 in overtime. We accept those. So if I don't get my balance, or my budget balanced, I'm in violation of the law, and it's going to mean that I'm going to turn down all those future requests. The other thing is we get reimbursed from the federal government for all of our transports that are involved with the feds. So we get involved with reimbursed at a double time and a half rate for all our officers that go to Chicago and to Hammond. We make 5 trips a week to Chicago, at least, and we make an average of 3 trips a week to Hammond. And we bring in like $250,000 in overtime reimbursements. And all I'm asking, I don't want all the money put back in my budget. I'm not looking for a surplus. I'm just looking to make sure that my balance, at the end of the year, balances out. And Bob Gessler just called me. He made the same request at the Criminal Justice Committee meeting. He's testifying today in Watsika. But he asked me to bring it up. I know it was added at the Criminal Justice meeting that his is $20-some thousand or something. I don't know exactly what it is. I guess I would defer to the chairman or to the vice or the finance chairman for some direction.
Chairman Boss.
Yeah, I'll, that discussion centered, came up last month, and I was one who said, kind of gave some direction, I guess, that I guess in total, the general fund did not exceed its budget, and my point of view was that the auditor, our auditing firm, does not make an issue about individual departments exceeding budget as long as the total budget does not exceed. We don't get written up on that point. I guess perhaps what I didn't appreciate was the fact that individual departments do have a statutory limit and technically should stay within budget. So in light of that, I would support the notion that finance department could internally make adjustments between department lines within our budget to cover those departments that exceeded. It was not just the sheriff, it was, as mentioned, coroner was over, elections was over, probation was over, and of course corrections was over to some extent. Several of those, there's good reasons and valid reasons, so it's not that there's any blame to pass around here. I think internally, in terms of our finance documents that we turn over to our auditor, that we can true up the budget and move on. So I would suggest that we could go ahead and do that without a great deal of fanfare.
Need a motion?
Need a motion? Mr. Fleck?
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and amend the budget as necessary as the sheriff requested. Do I need to specify that more?
I think that's, Mr. McCarty, have you got some input on this?
Well, we have contingency amounts, and also there was some additional contingency for the inmate activity and capital development, you know, that we could, you know, adjust around. That's what it's there for, you know, if departments, you know, for various reasons, you know, exceed their budget. So, you know, at this point, if you just want to, just an authorization that we can go in and adjust it. It's a management adjustment from contingency. We're not amending, we're not changing the entire general fund bottom line budget. We're adjusting between departments that I believe that we, you know, the committee can just make a motion, and you know, I can go ahead and do that and turn it over to the auditors that way.
Do we want to include Mr. Gessner in our?
Yes.
We have
Yes.
Public defender probation.
Yeah, I think we want to do all departments.
So we have a motion by Mr. Kolecki, and I need a second. Mr. Arsenault with a second. Mr. Yates?
Educate me on something here. The total budget for last fiscal year, we were where? I think the numbers are small. We were maybe a couple $100,000 in the red.
About $170,000 if I recall.
Okay, and my question for educational purposes is just simply this. I concur 100% what the sheriff is talking about and where he's coming from. And then the same would apply coroner elections. But how do we gauge where the 175 was shortfall came? Just from sales, lack of sales, revenue,
Lack of
projections,
revenue.
if you will?
Lack of revenue. You project that out 18, when you start the budget development, you're 18 months out in front of the end result. So you make projections.
Roger that.
And if it doesn't quite fit, every business does it. I mean, that's no different in any business. You make projections. And if revenue, you have a revenue shortfall, you have a revenue shortfall.
So I hear you say the shortfall itself just will be credited to shortfall short of projections, and not any deficiency on the part of any departments or budgeting process.
What we're trying to do is satisfy statutory requirements.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes.
Just clarification, I think that one thing we're missing perhaps is that we brought in over $500,000 above the revenue estimate that we projected 18 months ago. And so that $100-some thousand shortfall is clearly made up of the excess revenue that shows up. But two of them don't look at each other until the end of the year when you reconcile. But if you look at on the revenue side, it should exceed our projections. I hope.
Mr. Washington was first, and then Mr. Chairman last.
13. What we're saying here is we're authorizing the finance department to make these internal adjustments during the year while we're waiting for reimbursements for those expenditures that we're concerned about. We're not talking about pulling money from outside of our budget. We're talking about using monies from within the budget in order to do that balance.
We've set aside some contingency, and we're going to plug it in there.
Right.
Mr. Chairman Lawson.
I was just going to help clarify, maybe for Mr. Yates' benefit, as well as others. the general fund expenditures were actually under budget by $173,000. And that's all we're talking about is expenditure adjustments. Actually, revenue was in excess of budget by $188,000. So combined total, we're going to, and Mr. McCarty will show us in a minute, our ending numbers for the general fund. We had a surplus of revenue over expenses of $360,000. Internal to those expenses, though, certain departments were over budget, some were under budget. And as you say, we had contingencies available in a couple different line items. So we're basically utilizing those contingencies to absorb some expenditures that were above budget.
Let's see, Ms. Campbell.
Sheriff, you always budget for overtime. I know you cannot determine how much overtime you're going to have. Could you tell me about what percentage you put in for overtime? Do you have any idea? I mean, if you don't, it's not.
I don't have my budget with me.
That's okay, that's all right. But you always do budget for overtime.
I budget for overtime, and in years past, we've always made the adjustment. So that we haven't worried too much if we go over, as long as the revenues that came in from the various sources cover it.
I understand.
It gets reimbursed, so I can't say right offhand what it is.
That's fine, that's fine. I just wanted to point out that you do budget for overtime.
Yes.
Mr. McCarty and then Mr. Schultz.
Not trying to confuse what's going on here, but I hear reimbursements, revenues. Reimbursements go back into the expense line, so if it's a one-to-one, it does get put back in there. Whereas true revenues then go up into the revenue, side of things. So probably making things more complicated here, but I just wanted, there's been some discussion on reimbursements and everything's timed for when it happened, and if it shows up within the allotted time, it does go back in to offset that expense. So, but ultimately we're talking about a budgetary adjustment, not actuals at this point, from within the general fund. So, and contingency is included as part of the total, so it's an internal adjustment that doesn't change the total amount.
Mr. Schultz.
I'm just trying to clarify this in my head. George, feisty today. This will give the public actually a better perception, will it not, of exactly where respective departments are as far as the bottom line in the departments. Is that correct?
I don't know, Mr. Schultz, if that's correct or not. It's, our budget's $11.5 million or whatever. It's fairly convoluted to try and let somebody take a document that's 80 or 90 pages and have them go through and try to attach a revenue source to an expense line item. That maybe we get reimbursed from the feds for housing their inmates, but there's no relation between our staff providing medical care for those inmates. It's part of the $60 fee. So try and tie it all together would be a very difficult process. I think this will make it clear, and more importantly for me, I've got to be within those constraints that are established by law.
Thank you.
We got the motion in the second. Motion second, I thought we voted on it.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. And
State the motion.
you don't want to do it.
Let's state the motion, please.
That finance department can make adjustments in separate accounts to amend them when necessary. Mr. Vickery?
Yes.
Mr. Kalecki?
Aye.
Mr. Arsenal?
Aye.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Mr. LaJess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk? Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Schultz?
Aye.
Mr. Stoppenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Bossert?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The last two items I have are both equipment related. The first is the purchase of a skid loader. We had estimated that at a $43,000 acquisition. We now have an estimate of a Bobcat S-185 skid loader is $29,000. An 18,000-pound trailer, Kankakee trailer is $9,000. We want to buy 50 pallets to pack the sandbags on, it's $250 for a total of $39,738. Again, if we, I would not be averse to delaying this until the next fiscal year in terms of as we put together the budget to see where we stand. The flood season is upon us, but we have 20,000 sandbags already in reserve that are stacked. What we want to do with this device is this would allow us to take our mechanical sandbagging machine and move it anywhere in the county on the back of this trailer, to take the skid loader and put it on the back of the trailer, and then put the pallets on the back of the trailer and take those two moments or any place else in the county where there's flooding, drop that equipment off and let the people out there have immediate access to loading, protecting homes or businesses. So all I would like to look forward to is during the budget process next year, this be brought back up.
Mr. Scholl, with a question.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is something that, sort of a pet peeve of mine, I guess, is that too often we think of the police, sheriff's department or the fire departments as just that. Fire goes out and fights fire. It's an emergency service, and a bobcat, a skid loader, is something for sandbags that we need. I'm just surprised we haven't already done it. And this is something I think we definitely need to move forward on.
I think the sheriff's made the request here that we put it in next year's budget and move forward with it. Is there any other direction from the committee? Any other questions?
Do we need a motion on
I think at this point he's gonna put it in next year's
I
budget.
think that we can come back to this committee if we start the process for next year and get it in there.
Yeah, we could take it off and go line.
The last incident I had was a replacement of the incident command vehicles. You know that vehicles next month will be 22 years old. Not many of us are driving a vehicle that's 22 years old. In 3 more years, I can get antique plates for it.
Let's try and do that.
Just some idea. They're very expensive. We priced it out. It'd be somewhere around $19,000 to $20,000 a year for 20 years. We've also put in for this under the stimulus package. So again, I'm going to ask you to defer any action until we hear from Washington. If we get it, good story. If we don't, I'll be back.
Any questions at this point for the sheriff on these? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kowski.
Thank you for letting me come up here early. Not my bad.
County Auditor. She's been waiting patiently back there. Time to pay the bills.
Good morning.
Everyone should have a recap in their pass out.
All right, claims for February 2009. Highway Fund, $83,358.58. Highway Other Funds, $456,631.14, for a total of $539,989.72.
Mr. Scholl with a motion to approve. Mr. Washington with a second. Roll call vote.
Mr. Vickery?
Yes.
Mr. Kalecki?
Aye.
Mr. Arsenal?
Aye.
Ms. Barber? Aye. Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Mr. Lejes?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Bossert?
Aye.
Motion passes.
General fund, $2,322,043.07. Special funds, $3,027,292.92, for a total of $5,349,335.99.
Ms. Campbell?
My question is, how come special funds is so low this month as compared, or why was last month so high?
Last month, we were getting swamped with end of the year stuff.
Okay.
January is always like that.
Okay, I figured it was something like year-end totals or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, we still had quite a few this month, but the vast majority of them were last month.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Washington with a motion to approve. Mr. Stauffenberg with a second. Roll call.
Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Mr. Kleckie?
Aye.
Mr. Arsenal?
Aye.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Mr. Lejes?
You're French now.
Yes.
Ms. Polk?
Mr. Wojcicki.
Ms. Schmidt? Mr. Scholl? Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Bossert?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And county board payroll, December 10th through January 13th.
Aye.
Total meetings 93, per diem $6,324, mileage $1,431, for a total of $7,755.
Motion to approve by Mr. Lejes.
I just wondered if Bob Scholl's car broke down last month.
Second. Mr. Arsenal with a second. Roll call.
Mr. Vickery?
Aye.
Mr. Kleckie?
Aye.
Mr. Arsenal?
Aye.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Mr. Lejes?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Yates? Mr. Bossert?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Debbie. Insurance.
So I think
I'm going to defer to Mr. Bossert here just for a minute to set a little framework. Chairman
don't worry
Bossert.
about it.
I would ask the insurance subcommittee to perhaps meet for a few minutes right after this meeting. You can use my office upstairs. I need to get to another meeting in Bourbonnais. Mr. Stauffenberg, Mr. Lejes, Mr. Arsenault, and Mr. Vickery, would ask you to start thinking through a first step here in reviewing probably our property insurance might be our first issue. In terms of procedure and reviewing our policies and how we might talk to some brokers and that type of thing. So, right after this meeting, if you could spare a few minutes.
Can do. Next up, County Treasurer. We should have some reports in our packets. Sign.
Sure, this is good news. That stuff he's confused.
I guess we don't have copies for everybody on this. Okay. Set 13. Set 13.
Yes. See right there. Yeah, we're gonna get
Everybody's got copies?
parcels.
Thank you.
All right.
Is that what you need? Yeah.
So we need a motion on the county treasurer's report. Mr. Lejes with a motion. Mr. Scholl with a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like saying. Motion carries. Our Next would be the county collector's report. That's in your packet. Mr. Stauffenberg with a motion, Mr. Washington with a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like saying. Motion carries. Monthly resolutions for December and January. Mr. Lejes with a motion. Mr. Arsenault with a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like saying. Motion carries.
I'd like to first expand on what Steve was talking about with revenues and reimbursements. And I do agree with what the sheriff was talking about. There are extraordinary items that will take us over budget. And in my case, it's postage. I mean, I budget $15,000, and every year the post office raises their postage. And by state law, when I send out certified notices, I can charge $10. We're gonna make money on our certified notice. But in my line item, I don't get reimbursed for that. It just shows as a revenue to the county. So I want everybody to understand that I'm sure that this year I will go over budget. Because last year I was under budget $34. So, you know, that's about as tight as it gets. So, you know, it's a touchy subject when you have items you can't control, but you are receiving the revenue back in another line item. I just wanted to bring that up. Just two things. Yesterday I ordered the real estate tax bills and the mobile home bills, and on March 12th at 9 o'clock, from my software provider, in my office, we will be receiving a demo on the budget plan installment method that I talked about last month. So we're taking that cautiously. That's all I have for right now. I've been communicating with Steve and Mike, sending some emails on where we're at financially. We're going to grind it out. That's about all I can tell you.
Any question for the treasurer? Chairman Bott.
Just to comment on the DevNet contract, the company you're mentioning is our software provider, and this came from the Community Services Committee. Mr. Beatty brought it up. But DevNet's not asking for an increase on a renewal on their contract.
Wonderful.
They're willing to lock in, what, 4 years, Mark?
Oh, I'm not aware of that. See, I'm not involved with that.
Okay.
That was always brought up through Sheila in the assessor's office, so I'm not aware.
Sounds like the discussions went well. First they were looking for a little increase, and now they've backed off and said we'll freeze it at current level. And it sounds like in addition they're going to provide this extra installment plan software. And so that's kind of a little bit of good news.
I might have a little bit to do with that, because throughout the years I've received many phone calls from many counties that have asked about this program, DevNet. And I know that through referrals they've received a lot of customers. So I'm sure, because we were one of their first customers, so they're probably, you know, tit for tat type thing helping us out. So that's a good thing. That's all I have.
Any questions? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're down to Mr. McCarty in the finance department. You got stuck with the bad one there.
Still don't have December sales. We're still guessing. No, that's a normal cycle. We won't see December till March. Well, we get the money in February, if it's November collection. It's still holding its own, right?
You don't have one, I'll have one. What do you use now?
Well, I look at the year as a whole.
Yeah.
we're back above.
Morning, Mr. McCarty.
Good morning. Have some updated information here that we'll cover first. First one is the income tax. We'll start with the income tax page. So everybody's looking at the right one. Trend-wise, we've had 4 decreases in a row, so it's not looking good. We'll keep an eye on that, but you know, if it's a sign of the times here, you know, it's something that we'll have to keep an eye on. But that's just an update as far as monthly collections. You know, and it's the difference is compared to the prior year. So it's, you know, really an update and something that we'll keep an eye on and how that will affect us for the 09 and for the 10 budget. And then on the back side of that is sales tax by month. Sales tax, on the other hand, went back up. You know, as you can see, took 3 year comparisons as far as what it's done annually. Went down, went back up, so we'll see what happens here. The next collection in March will be for December, so we'll see how December went during the holiday season and go from there. So unfortunately, all of these numbers that you're looking at for sales tax is all 08. It's not 09 yet because of the timing and from the accounting rules and regulations. We have to go by what the left-hand column, when it's collected by retailers and our fiscal year, and line it up with our fiscal year. So that's how it goes into officially goes into the book. So we'll see how 09 trends out here, so as the information shows up. So any questions on those 2 update reports? All right, the next sheet, general fund analysis activity summary. I like to call it a big picture report. Basically taking all the activities, separating them out, and then bring it to a total. As you can see, if we concentrate on the non-grant revenue and follow that across, you know, it actually decreased. So even though sales tax that we just saw increased, as far as everything else, all revenues that are non-grant related actually decreased from fiscal year 07 to fiscal year 08 in total. So when we look at individual revenues, and you know, we hear some are going up, that's good news, but in total we got to make sure we keep an eye on the total picture and the total trend of all activity, of fees and fines and everything. So as you can see, unfortunately that trend is slowed down from 06, or basically was even from 06 to 07, and then decreased from 07 to 08. So something we definitely, you know, have to keep an eye on. As you can see, we're with the grant activity, you know, that activity has slowed down. The negative number again is the local match in the grant activity, and then the total, you know, of both non-grant and grant activity basically shows us where we would be without, if we did not have the inmate program at all. That's where we would be at, is we'd have $1 million deficit, basically $1 million, $31,000 deficit is basically what's looking at us. Then the inmate activity, all related expense, there broke down, including the bond payment. And then at the bottom, total revenue, total expense, and then a surplus at this point of $362,000. So unfortunately, that's about all the good news I have for you right now. Because the next page is the what if scenario. All of you have heard the possibility, what the retro pay is for the union contract coming up. So what I did is basically pulled out 07 and 08 and just titled them official, meaning that's what officially, the first page is what officially is turned over to the auditors and what will be on the financial documents for, obviously what was on the documents for fiscal year 07, and once the audit is finished, the range that it'll probably land in, because it's still subject to audit for fiscal year 08. So that's what I call them. Yeah, the fun part is official draft. That's a fun name, but the draft idea is the fact that it's not audited yet, but that's what we turned over. Okay, then if we take those numbers and apply what the retro would have been had it been approved earlier in time frame, where we would have applied it differently. I showed you what the year ends would be with the retro in it had it been applied earlier. Understand that eventually the retro will all be paid out in 09, and the adjustment will all happen officially in our current fiscal year. And that adjustment is approximately, it's hovering right around $1 million. There's still some things being looked into from the arbitration and the legal side of things, so we don't have the official number yet, but we have a pretty good idea where we're going to land here, and it's a major adjustment. But I wanted to at least show you the impact and how it changes things, not only what we're dealing with right now and currently, but coming up, as we look ahead in the 2010 budget cycle and process as well, as a what-if scenario. So I don't know if I'm going to spend a ton of time on here, but obviously you can see if you go down to the very bottom that the fund balance would be adjusted by the approximate $1 million rounded out, and it also puts the total of non-grant grant activity without the inmate program up to almost $1.3 million deficit instead of just over the million. So it adds another $300,000. So the difficult part for this committee and the board, as we see and running with the deficit numbers, is what this will mean for the 2010 budget. So if we have revenues that are decreasing or holding on, or barely holding on, and we have expenses that continue to rise, health insurance, salaries, utility costs, we've adjusted out all the contingency we had available, in the last two budget cycles. We have $400,000 currently in the 09 budget for contingency. Unfortunately, I think this committee and the board is going to have to decide where and how to potentially cut, or decide that we're going to run a deficit and dig into the fund balance even further as we come up to the 10 budget cycle for next year. So it's very early in trending, obviously with the 09 information and how 09 is all going to end up, but I wanted to put this out because 09 is probably at this point going to run at least $1 million deficit on paper when it's officially put out, but it's because of the 3-year, the retro cycle and the timing and all the the accounting rules and regulations that go into all this. But it doesn't change the fact of what the reality is and where we're at. So I know there's many needs out there, as we just heard, various departments. And the reason there was, to go back the last 2 years, the reason that there was contingency to adjust, I've heard numerous comments about hiding stuff and different things like that, was through the committees and prior chairman, and the approach was to try to put stuff away for the courthouse, to try to do a courthouse, and also the net revenue of the inmate program, to put it away to pay the debt down. So there's two issues that, from a budgetary standpoint, that we were putting in, that you could call contingency, you could call reserved, you could, given any number of things, that we were building towards for future projects. And when the revenues took a turn between '05 and started to shake in '06, and then a definite change in '07, a lot of that contingency buildup or the reserve buildup in the budget to plan for those projects then started being reassessed out to operations as all these expenses and everything have changed. So now we're down to, we don't have any more contingency to play with as far as a budgetary concern, so it's down to more cuts for departments, you know, or a deficit, running true deficit at this point as far as putting it on paper. So from a budgetary standpoint, and the reason I'm fearful of this, there are a number of reasons, is we're hearing from our assessor, Steve Beatty, that because of the 0.1% CPI increase and the assessments adjustments through the economic new construction numbers low, there probably won't be much, and offset by there's parts to that on the assessment side that deduct from us. I can't think of the name right now, but where that probably won't see much of an increase in property tax for 2010. The inmate program, although the sheriff is working on raising the per bed day charge, especially to the feds, right now is still at $60 a day, and with it running full, those increases that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years are now going to plateau off because there's no more beds to rent. So all of the increase was because we continued to fill up beds. You see income tax potentially starting to decline. Now, whether it'll continue to do that the entire year, and then what sales tax will do is we'll have to wait and see. So a lot of our major revenue streams are all now at a plateau. So when you got revenues staying flat and you got expenses pushing up against it, you either got to cut back the expenses or you end up running a deficit. So it's not good news, but I think it's something that the committee has to prepare for and think about, and discuss to see how we will approach the 2010 budget, because obviously there's different approaches, different amounts of work, research, things that have to be done, as we head into that. So it's new information, and going on trend, I'm going on the retro pay, which is forever changed there, as far as the change, not only what we're back paying, but also into the future. So, and the trend, and we will continue to show you trend as soon as we get a little bit more, which I should be able to this month as we're coming up to the first quarter. We have all the annual adjustments done. The audit is starting today, as a matter of fact, and now we'll be able to look into '09 and look ahead here, now that we have all the '08 and everything closed out. So it's not good news, but that's the reality of the economic times that we're in. It can show the trends, trying to show you the trends on paper and the big picture, because it is difficult when one subject at a time comes up to know how that fits in. You get confused on reimbursements and all the different lines. So this is the best picture I can show you of the general fund, and all the activity of all the departments, on one page, and to show you, that trending situation. So I wish I had better news. I don't like always having to be the one to bring bad news, but unfortunately that's a reality that we're in. We'll have to continue to, ride this thing out here for a little while and see what happens here, so economically and the like. So.
Your projection on the '09 budget ending, what do you think?
Well, I'll try to work on that. I just roughly, we have a balanced budget with $400,000 of contingency, and that's assuming that the revenues that we projected will show up, which is probably not going to be the case just because of all the change in trend. But if everybody stayed online and we got the $1 million coming in, you know, we're probably gonna be between $750,000 to $1 million deficit, actual deficit in '09 to adjust the 2 years of retro, and then obviously, well, it's almost 3 years of the change in the union contract. So it's all going to adjust in fiscal year '09 from an accounting standpoint, because, you know, that's why the retro, the what if retros for '07 or '08 are just what ifs. It's not an actual entry, so all the entire payout and change will all hit '09. So we'll probably be talking about a budget amendment in total as well, because when we did the '09 budget, the information we had at the time, we thought this contract was going to be done in time to be adjusted back, but it passed the time frame that we're allowed to do it from an accounting standpoint, and it's all going to shift to '09. So it's going to, you know, because of that unknown information, you know, it's just something that we have to adjust to. So, in the '09 budget. But until those numbers are all done and finalized and in the system, we won't talk about, you know, all that at this point. But understand that, you know, from the feel-good numbers of $362,000 surplus, that in reality is going to adjust out by about $1 million when it's all said and done at this point.
If the present trend continues through '10, through our '10 projection, our $5 million total fund balance would reduce to approximately $3 million. Is that what? Am I getting that feeling here?
Well, it'll be around $4 million. No, it's not. It's not going to be a $2 million adjustment. The $5 million will adjust by about $4 million. You know, and we have to take into consideration as we trend out what the total revenue and expense of all the other activities are going to be at this point. But it's so early, you know what I mean? I just wanted to show that it's going to be around $1 million adjustment for sure, because of the, you know, basically only related to the retro, plus then we have to watch what the rest of the activity does as well. So at this point, it's hard to know exactly. It's very early, but it's definitely going to adjust.
So I think really what the message that Steve's giving us is we're going to get a lot of requests from a lot of departments, and it's going to be a challenging year budget-wise. When, as we talked about, when revenues decline, expenses go up. And, we've got some labor contracts off in the future, and it's going to be a challenge this year. So, in line with that, I'd like to ask Steve to, as we always do, because we have new members, is to provide us at next meeting with our budget schedule, so that we can be coming into our meetings prepared monthly, knowing what actions and what stage we are in budget preparation. Another thing that we kind of need to know about at this point, beginning of the budget preparation, is our sunset grant report that we get every year, so that we know what grants are sunsetting and what that can mean to our budget process. I thought those are two items that we probably need in our budget process. Okay, we're going to switch tapes 1 minute.
Is there any other questions on the big picture reports and that information? The next report also is one step lower, if you will, for revenue and expense by department. So, you know, revenues by department, expenses by department. Just to show you, you know, what happens at what level, you know, for both of those. So, you know, taking the big picture and bringing it down to the subdivision of the departments, you know, to show where this activity takes place at there. So, you know, it's basically the same net results. You know, it just shows a breakdown by department. So you can see as far as where the declines are, you know, and increases, some increase, some departments increase, some departments decrease, where, you know, where the net changes are from the, you know, from the on the previous page, and why things are going down. So, you know, both economically, you know, as far as in the different areas. And then where the expenses are by departments. I won't spend a lot of time on that. If you have any questions, you know, I'd be happy to stop and answer anything. And then the rest of the packet is all the special funds. So it was showing the, you know, the year-end numbers that we turned over to the auditors, fund balance per, you know, fund, through, you know, from starting with tort all the way, you know, through animal control. So, you know, anybody had any questions with general fund or special funds, you know, related activity. The court security fund that we were just talking about today, you know, not to pick on it, but if you're curious, it's Fund 260, I believe. Yeah, it's Fund 260. And the fund numbers are right at the top with the number and the name. The ending fund balance for that is approximately $650,000. So it was, you know, it's nice to see department heads using, you know, trying to think outside the box when possible within the statutory limits of these special funds. And, you know, in times, a rainy day that we have, you know, we need to encourage all the department heads to use these funds to the best of their ability, you know, and think outside the box within the legal limits, but be creative and use these, because, you know, some of these funds have nice balances in them. You know, we definitely need to tap them as much as possible, especially right now during this time. So I won't dwell on, you know, a lot. I just wanted to just randomly. The other one that I know that had some concern in the past is the BAC, which is 380. It's toward the back of the report. You know, in the past we've had some deficits and running the fund balance down, and I know Dick was concerned. We got it, I guess the gap closed, it had a surplus of $5,500 for fiscal year 2008. So obviously that's just 1 year, but at least we've got it in the ballpark. It still has an ending fund balance of about $310,000. So you know, I think we at least stopped the bleeding there anyway and got that fund to balanced out. So if there's any other questions on any other funds.
Mr. Legette.
On the Kankakee County Statement of Revenues and Expenditures, on the revenue side, if it's in the brackets, that's a good, and in the expenditures, if it's in the brackets, then a bad, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the other question I had was, I'm sure this, I'll probably answer my own question, but all the fees that different departments are can charge statutorily, are those at the maximum for the most part? Do we know, have we done a study on what fees can be charged, and, you know, what the high and low ends are and where we're at? I mean, is there any way that some of those fees could be raised to increase the expenses or revenues?
It's certainly something that we can look into. We did have an intern last year to begin that process, that we can relook at some of the fees are statutorily set. Some have a range, but look if we're in that range, you know, to do that. So we can. It's certainly something that we need to look into. Yeah, some of the fees go obviously to the special funds. Some are related to general funds. So you got multiple levels of situation.
Chairman Bossert.
Yeah, Mr. Legess raises an excellent point that our special fees, user fees, is something that we need to investigate a bit and see what might be available to utilize. And probably maybe the way to approach this would be we'll ask individual department heads as to suggestions as to what fees they have control of and what flexibility they have within that to raise a few of those fees.
That might be an excellent point on the agenda at the department head meetings.
Yes. Beyond that, can I make a statement? Mr. Chairman, over the years, you've made complimentary statements about Mr. McCarty and his efforts in our budget, and I just want to reiterate that it's a good thing we have Steve to ride herd on budget and keep us informed as to what's going on. He's unfortunately taken on the role of Dr. No from time to time, and to some extent, we as a board need to be appreciative of that and maybe stepping up and be the ones who are the heavy, not necessarily our department head. So I'll just say that out loud, that me as a chairman and the rest of the board, I would hope would support me, that we really have to take a hard look at our budget and our expenses as we move forward here to get through this down cycle that we're experiencing.
I think we tried to draw a line in the sand last year and even the year before a little, and we've explored some budget cutting processes and tried to get the message out. And I felt pretty good about Mr. Glazier and Judge Elliott. They had explored a couple of the funds that we had been asking department heads to explore before they came to us in the general fund. And so the more that we can get department heads to take a look at those special funds and make sure that they had explored that, use the one special fund that the sheriff stepped up, but the more that we can get those special funds in use when applicable, the easier it'll be on our general fund. I don't know, we've got an early look here, but it looks like we're stuck around 32 million bucks. And that's going to be about what we're going to deal with as the general fund. So it's echoing Chairman Bossert's. I guess all of us is probably going to end up being Dr. No. It's going to be a difficult year. So, anything else, Steve?
Unless there's any other questions on the financial reports, we also have some additional information on the offline accounts that we discussed last month. So go to that. The first parts of it is basically restating, the information from the audit finding, the corrective action plan, and information, and then the very last page, we put together some options from the discussion at the last finance committee meeting. To see, and as you've had time maybe to think about it, to contemplate, maybe you've talked to other departments, if you had any other ideas with these offline accounts. Basically, as we've also thought about it after hearing, some of your comments, one of our, suggestions was maybe that we have the departments, the related departments, the list, maybe come and explain the activity to you, as well. We did some interviewing, in the research process, but it's not really our call as far as what happens with these. They're in elected offices, and some are definitely statutorily set. The board, could decide, offline or online. Online meaning it goes through, the general ledger, basically, that everything else that you're reviewed today and the claims go through, and not have a separate checking account. As we get into board, regulation and the elected department heads, we also threw a suggestion out that maybe they need to come and explain what, that activity is, or who it's for, and why they have this particular thing. So, it's one of the things that we could keep it as is and have monthly reports of the activity come to either the auditor's office, finance, and treasurer's, or combination. You know, one of those offices or combination. You know, have them all come online as was suggested. You know, or something in between. We did learn that the marriage fund within the courts is audited by there's an office, state office of the Supreme Court. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but and they also provided us statutory information that we did not have that allowed that fund to be there, and it is controlled offline and is watched by the state. As well, we had some information on the commissary and then the circuit clerk accounts. The circuit clerk accounts are audited separately in our annual audit, and it has a specific requirement to be reported to the state court system as well, to that same department of the state. However, you know, we can do things a little differently as far as how things are processed. You know what I mean? So that's what we're talking about. So it isn't that you know, the things can't be changed, but there are certain, you know, connections to these, and that's where when we were learning some other new information that we did not have, that the discussion brought out, that we thought, well, maybe it would be wise that everybody get a chance to, you know, communicate that as well. So that's just a suggestion. It's really up to the committee and the board, you know, where your comfort zone is with these accounts. You know, as where we, you know, create a policy for these, as recommended by the outside auditors, as we continue, you know, to go forward here. So I just leave it up to discussion, you know, or you know, to the committee's pleasure here.
Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. Steve, on the option C, what we're basically saying there then is that all these accounts will go through the finance department. They will retain their independence, but we will have a constant record and awareness of these accounts. Is that correct?
Right. It would go through the auditor's office, finance, and treasurer. You know, the auditor's office reviews the claims. You know, we enter the claims. The treasurer's office prints the report. So, and then as far as the cash accounts, Mark has, you know, you have in your packet on a monthly basis the claims. They would be broke out where you would see them on a monthly basis if it went through. You know what I mean? What everything else flows through, it would show up on those reports. As now they're offline, we do not know the activities, you know, that happens, you know what I mean, on those accounts. So
As a private citizen to come in and say, you know, these accounts, Treasurer's Department isn't even aware of them. I mean, I don't think that's proper. I would like to see the C option as follows. The option is presented here at C. We need an awareness of it. That they have the funds available is understandable, but we need a trail and a knowledge of where these funds are.
Mr. Clay.
In my experience in the private sector with offline accounts, they're usually for small amounts of money that generally don't need to be put online. A good example I saw on last month's Finance Committee meeting with some of the offline accounts that were out there. The sheriff had an offline account out there for revenue sales from his calendars. I mean, things like that are small, you know, fund balance and number, and they're things that, you know, internal things that the department does. As long as we're following the law, as long as it's legal, I don't really necessarily see the need for some of these things to be, you know, handled by finance and have a claim, you know, check cut, you know, as normal things are done. However, I do think that they need to be looked at, and I do think that we need to know about them. I think that I recommended that last month, maybe, that, you know, this is something where we should probably see the statements, we should know what goes in and out of them, but I don't necessarily think that the county should have to take control over certain offline accounts that, you know, could probably remain offline. There are some things, though, that maybe shouldn't be offline and that we should think about moving in-house. But, you know, offline accounts have their place, and I don't really think that some of them should be a big deal.
Any other, Mr. Schultz?
Thank you. I understand where Chad's coming from, but in the public sector, you know, the accountability, I think, is more crucial. And some of these accounts are excessive. And the public has a right to know where these are at and have a visual accounting of them. So I would like to include everything in the treasurer's department, so we have a record of it. I don't care if it's for $50 or whatever, but I think it's the most responsible way to go.
Mr. Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. Because the total account, $2.7 million. That's the bottom line. That's far too much money, regardless of what type of accounts they're in. It's far too much money to be dangling out there and there's no accountability. $2.7 million.
I agree with Mr. Scholl as well. In the past, there have been wild accusations flying around, and some of them probably were true. There was funds being hid that has not been applied to the recent years, but they could come back quickly. And I wouldn't like to be in the position of trying to explain away why we don't have accountability for those funds.
Also, if you'll recall, a few years back, we had a problem in the one commissary where there was, you know, some embezzlement. And, you know, maybe this would have stopped some of that. Plus, you know, some of these accounts only need one signature. If I was on that account, I'd absolutely want more than one signature if it was me.
And I think someone just brought up a good point, because we don't want to be in a position of defending something that goes wrong. I mean, our due diligence is to make sure that accounting procedures, and they're raising the bar on accounting procedures, and we need to follow that. I understand Mr. Flecker's point about some of these small accounts, and also there's rather large accounts.
It was brought up last month about putting these accounts under the control of the various offices that they need to check quickly. Well, that's all well and good. Everybody, I'm quite sure there are other department heads within the general fund that need to check quickly. And you can do that. It doesn't have to go through months, you know, weeks of whatever. I just think that this is wrong, that these accounts are sitting out there with that kind of money. We should not do this.
Transparency.
Transparency is the key word now. So,
yeah, look at our governor and all the
do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we do option C.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, option C.
Second.
Mr. Yates with a second, and I need a roll call here. Let's do this roll call.
Mr. Vickery?
Yes.
Mr. Kalecki?
Nay.
Mr. Arsenal?
Nay.
Ms. Barber? Ms. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. James?
Aye.
Mr. Legess?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Scholl?
Aye.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Bossert? Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Motion carries. Go to option C. Yeah. This will have to go to the board.
That's all I had, unless there's other questions.
You got any other questions for Mr. McCarthy? Okay. Yeah, let me take a look here. What else have we got? I think we've got it covered. Any old business to come before this committee? Any old business to come before the committee? No, Ms. Schmidt.
Don't worry, we'll make this quick. The only thing I want to say about the skid loader is maybe we should check in to see if there's other agencies in the county or in the region that have a skid loader, or that we could partner with to buy a skid loader or something like that. Somebody, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like the DNR or somebody, since it is a river issue and a flooding issue, there may be another agency we can partner with.
I think we need some options to look at least as a committee. Mr. Scholl?
Yeah, there is one, as I understand it, in the highway department, but my contention is that, you know, with emergency response, we need it now. We don't need to try to find it and make sure that it's available when somebody else is using it. We need it now, and especially with sandbags. I mean, when the river is going over its banks, we need that equipment now.
Mr. Hess?
That was basically what I was going to say. Thank you, Chairman. We discussed that at the Criminal Justice Committee, and the last time it happened, I mean, the Highway Department works closely with everybody, but they were using it, and it was a 4-hour delay. When you've been in emergency services, 4 hours is a mess.
Yeah, that's what he said. It was tied up.
And one of my first thoughts about this when it came up and I saw in the minutes was that it's too bad we can't put some contractor under contract that they respond, that we don't have an investment other than an hourly investment. It's an option, but, you know, the sheriff may not be satisfied, but, you know, there should be one contractor out there. We'll put one other person to work, or 2 people, you know, and when the sheriff calls, I don't care if it's midnight, they respond. And maybe we get into a contract.
Unless they're on a job.
Unless, well.
Then you're in the same position.
Then you're in the same position, yeah. But, I mean, we need to look at a few options here. Budget restraints, you know, we're here about the money end of it. What can we afford? Mr. Yates, did you have a comment?
Lost my brother-in-law.
Thank you, Chair.
My mother, then my father, and now my sister.
I don't know how much a skid loader might be affected by icy weather in terms of climate time of year, but as we found out a month or so ago, there are times when the roads are so bad, even the contractor can't get to where he or she needs to be. So that's something to keep in mind.
That's true. Any new business to come before the committee? Any new business? Not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Legess with a motion, Mr. Kalecki with a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.